This week on Storyboard, ahead of Brahmastra Part 1 Shiva's OTT release, we caught up with Ayan Mukerji and Namit Malhotra of Prime Focus and DNEG on the vision for the film and how tech and VFX played the role of breathing life into this vision, way forward for using VFX in Indian cinema and much more. Ayan also gives a sneak peek into what's in store for Part 2. We have Amresh Godbole, who's the CEO of Digital Technology Business at Publici Group India, speaking to us about the digital spends during the Diwali and what are the kind of solutions that brands are looking for in the post-pandemic world. And we have ad industry veteran Ambi Parameshwaran, who is launching a new book this week, All the World's a Stage, a personal branding story. Hello and welcome to Storyboard. I'm Shibani Gharat. There is no doubt that the future of VFX in Indian cinema is bright, with the likes of Bahubali saga mesmerizing the Indian audience with grandeur and visuals. Ayan Mukerji's much talked about film Brahmastra Part 1 Shiva just proved that dreaming big shouldn't be a one-off. Although the film features mega stars such as Alia Bhatt, Ranbir Kapoor and Amitabh Bachchan in the lead, its world-class VFX somewhat manages to steal their thunder. And now this Ayan Mukerji's epic fantasy is all set for OTT release. I caught up with him along with Namit Malhotra, founder of Prime Focus Limited, chairman and global CEO of a 7-time Oscar-winning company, DNEG, that came on board as a producer for Brahmastra. And I spoke to them about the vision for the film, how tech and VFX played the role of breathing life into this vision and way forward for using VFX in Indian cinema and much more. Listen in. At the outset, I must congratulate you on the success of Brahmastra. In many ways, the film is a landmark film in terms of scale, in terms of technology, in terms of visual effects. It shows that India can produce and make films such as Brahmastra that can compete with what we see, in the West. What does it feel to envision something like this and put life into a film such as Brahmastra Part 1?
Oh, wow. First, thank you. Spoken very nicely about the film. I feel really good, and I feel grateful that something that we worked on so hard for so long has sort of brought us to a very good and a very interesting place. I'm super excited about the way the film has been received, but I'm even more excited about what it is that we can build from here on into the future. And quickly, before you direct a question, Namit, also I should just say that, it's an interesting moment for us that we're doing this interview together, because it's one of the few things that me and Namit are doing together as a media piece. And Namit, who is one of our producers on Brahmastra and also the pillar really of the whole visual effects journey on the film, our relationship even beyond visual effects has been very interesting and deep in crafting this whole journey together and, hopefully crafting the future as well.
Over to you, Namit. I was reading somewhere that there were 2,400 VFX shots in Avengers Endgame and up to 4,500 in Brahmastra Part 1. Correct me if I'm wrong.
You are right.
So, tell me, what role did tech play in enabling something, the vision that Brahmastra had or Ayan had for Brahmastra?
I really wanted to take this opportunity to bring something truly original for India, from India. And Ayan's vision was clearly in that realm to start with. The second most important thing was that because of the way he was approaching it, it was a very open door. Like most directors will be very fixated about what they want and how they want it. Here was Ayan, who was very easy about, let's figure out what's the best way to do it. Maybe even do things that even Hollywood or India has never done before. And therefore, collaborating on the vision, collaborating on techniques, on what we do first, what we do second, how we actually go about fixing the methodology of how the best quality experience is produced, not just visual effects. And that's where we spend a lot of our time talking. If you can dream it, we can do it. So there's nothing you can envision now that through the aid of technology and creative thinking that we can't execute.
That's a great thought, actually. You know, if you can dream it, we can do it. And you know, in many ways, what we saw in Brahmastra was like someone has to do it for others to believe that okay, this is possible. Ayan, what is the kind of budget that was allocated for visual effects and VFX? You know, to make it happen to such a great
No, so
scale.
it's a complicated question. I would say it was about 30% of our overall budget that was invested in VFX. So here's what happened. You know, when I first met Namit, who is obviously through his life experience and achievement very not intimidated by visual effects. One of the first things he said to me was, yeah, don't stress so much about the visual effects. Make the film, focus on the story. He himself, you know, was very passionate about the music, the way the overall emotional aspect of the story would play out. But from where I was standing, obviously I was intimidated by the visual effects, and I knew that it was, you know, like in Ye Jawani Hai Diwani, the songs were like, in a way, the pillar of the film. And from my perspective, while there was my story, I knew that the visual effects sequences were the pillars of this film. So, so that's how we sort of looked at the game, in a way. And I think what happened is he essentially helped to build that bridge for me to be not that intimidated eventually by the visual effects and get the film done. And even what you asked me, how we made the budget sort of play out on Brahmastra 1, because technically we were trying to buy a quality in the film which was beyond what had happened in a Hindi film before. You know, we needed a budget beyond what had happened in a Hindi film before. That bridge we built very interestingly with Namit, you know, and because he, it's his company, it's all under him. We found a very interesting model to make it happen for Brahmastra.
And
you know,
which was
financially as well.
Yeah, and which was the most difficult sequence to execute?
Well, so you know, the big sequence in our film is of course our climax.
Climax, yeah.
And Namit brought a very interesting thing to it, very disruptive, you know, play to it in the beginning, which is he encouraged us to start the movie with the climax, because he felt like if we crack it and solve it, that'll be amazing, right at the beginning. And somehow I was reckless enough to agree to his perspective, somehow, because it was a bizarre suggestion. Let's start with the climax. We'd not established ki Ranbir kaun hai film mein, Alia ka kya hai, but we started with this big, massive climax. But it was a very good suggestion eventually, we learned, because we took on the hardest part first. And it set the template for all the visual effects that were then, you know, going to work backwards from there and be integrated in the whole film. The sequence which we got stuck on was weirdly the sequence where the artist's character, Nagarjuna sir's character, takes on the truck and channels this massive like bull, Nandi energy behind him.
The Nandi bull sequence, you know, as we refer to it, I think had in the styling of it and in the visualization of what the story demanded and the time at which the story plays out, I think had some you know, needs, because they drive through the night, they'll get to that location, it has to be a day sequence. And what we found was that the power of the astras were colliding with the entire environment. And that became an issue, that because we paid heed to the story part, and then as we were starting to design the look of the power, it was fighting against the blue sky and the
just wouldn't look good in the day, essentially.
The day,
you know,
the blue
just
sky.
energy against like daylight, basically.
So we had to really think up a way in which we had to trigger that, you know, that sort of moment where the power takes off and creates this, you know, complete focused environment in which that sequence plays out.
Interestingly, it doesn't end here. So having said that, I have to ask you this, and you know already what my next question is.
I'm not going to say anything, and I can't really say anything.
What's in store for Brahmastra Part 2?
I think that one of the things we've achieved now with Part 1 is that we've got the foundational concept of this universe in place. You know, there were a lot of things we had to establish. What are these astras? How do they function? I think that's a little bit all in, and now we can really just belt out, you know, the story. I think definitely one of the things that's a given, that of course visually, and you know, we hope to make it bigger and more exciting. But more importantly, I think the energy of Dave's character, which is, you know, going to fuel part 2, is a far more dramatic, volatile character that we are going to, you know, develop here. And I think that just dramatically, part 2 and part 3 will be a lot juicier. You know, it'll be, yeah, just a lot juicier.
Over to you, Namit. We have seen that the Indian VFX sector is getting a lot of push from the state and the central government. It was also mentioned during this year's budget speech. What more is required in the coming days?
From an industry development standpoint, we do have to create an artistic pool that has to be much more comfortable and experienced at the same time in dwelling on these worlds and making sure that we can then work with filmmakers from inception to execution or delivery, as we say.
Can you explain the artistic pool part?
See, there's obviously, there are many different facets of what is termed visual effects. Because you can have visual effects that have a lot of animals, or you can have visual effects that have different energies like fire or water. You've got to create specialized artist pools that can do each of these things very specifically.
Okay.
These are specific specializations that are needed to deliver that quality on screen.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's where we got to create a deeper pool of artists who can do each of those aspects in a more credible or qualitative manner.
Okay.
And that's sort of where I think, and that's already happening, to be honest with you. It's already happening at a pretty fast pace, but the faster and the bigger it is, the better it's going to be.
My final question to you, Ayan. The box office release happened. How did it meet your expectations? And now it's getting released on OTT. Much wider audience will be able to see it through their mobile phones, through their laptops. So what are your expectations from this?
I'm actually very, very passionate about this streaming release. One thing I should just say is, and it was not something I was prepared for, which is that we continue to work on the film even after it released theatrically, and I feel that the version that's coming on Disney Plus Hotstar, other than the 3D component that we won't get on it, is in many ways a more refined version. You know, I've tweaked the edit and I added a few things, and there was some feedback that I got, and I realized that we'd made some decisions on the edit last minute. We refined the music, we worked very hard on the mix. So we've worked on this film, and I realized just from having been out this last couple of months that society has come to a point where a lot of people like just 1 degree of separation from me are waiting for the film to come on streaming to sit down and watch it. Because we are involved in this longer term storytelling, part 2, part 3, and then eventually the Astraverse, more people watching the film, settling down with it, understanding the concept is really important to me.
Yeah.
I also suspect, and we'll see how this plays out, that the manner in which you take in a film when you watch it in the cinema is very different from how you watch a film when you're sitting at home and watching it at your own sort of convenient pace. In a way, sometimes you can almost be less critical. You can also catch on to things that you've missed a little bit. A little bit of the heat of judgment is a little bit reduced. So, yes, I'm very passionate about it coming out on streaming.
All the best for that, and thank you so much. Thanks both of you for joining us today.
Thank you, Shiva.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Also, interestingly, Disney Plus Hotstar has released a campaign with Ranbir Kapoor, and it uses all the memes on the movie to promote the premiere. On that note, it is time for us to take a short break. On the other side, we have Amresh Godbole, who's the CEO of Digital Technology Business at Publici Group India, speaking to us about the digital spends during Diwali and what are the kind of solutions that brands are looking for in the post-pandemic world.